Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Dutch, so I try to start in time and finish on time. Let's see how we manage today. Everyone, a warm welcome here in Barcelona, and it is a pleasure to moderate this panel on such a crucial and hot topic: foreign policy and the progressive fight for global justice, peace, and fair trade. And in the face of reactionary forces on the international stage, shifting geopolitical balances and evolving diplomatic and economic principles, this panel offers an opportunity to contribute to the development of a robust, progressive alternative. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to my fellow panelists. It's a privilege to be joined by such dedicated, insightful, and inspiring voices, and I see a lot of you also made it to this room for this panel. We have in this panel Dr. Mohammed Shtayyeh, the former Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, Sir Salman Khurshid, the former Minister of External Affairs, Law and Justice, and Minority Affairs of India, Magris Cabreros, the Global Coordinator of the Global Alliance. Next to me on the left, Pepe Provenzano, MP and International Secretary of the Partito Democratico from Italy, and Raphael Heiber, the co-founder and Executive Vice President of the Common Action Forum. We will also hear concluding remarks from Junya Ogawa, the president of the Centrist Reform Alliance in Japan. And as we only have 45 minutes together to cover such a wide arrangement of topics, I will ask each panelist 2 questions, and I kindly ask them to remain within the 3-minute answer. This is always the biggest challenge, as you know. As we have speakers here who could by themselves fill up the whole hour, I'm sure of it, also very interesting insights. I'm delighted to start with Dr. Mohammed Shtayyeh. Thank you for being here. And having championed the Palestinian cause and the 2-state solution within international institutions, do you believe that these institutions can still embody justice? Or is it necessary to reform the International Criminal Court and devise new forms of global activism? And in the same line, why is it so important to recognize the state of Palestine at the international level now, as the country in which we are now in recently also did? Dr. Shtayyeh, word is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thanks to the audience. I extend my gratitude for those who are here today, and to the Spanish government and to the Prime Minister of Spain, who has been a champion of peace and justice and who is standing solid in line with history. Having said that, for the Palestinians, the fight for 2-state solution has to do with so many elements. One, it's about legitimate rights of people and right of self-determination. It's an ethical issue. It's for those who believe in 2 states that has recognized one state, they should recognize the other. And the Palestine question has been the center of gravity for the whole region for so many years. And for those who believe, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, that if he takes the war to Iran or to Lebanon, to anywhere, that he will simply avoid the question of Palestine, he's very wrong. Having said that, it's not about the reforming of the ICC. It's about giving mandate and all the powers and membership of those who are taking part and members of the ICC should really allow ICC to function, because ICC is the guarantor of international law, is the guarantor of peace and justice in the world. And those who have been members of ICC totally violating the basic bylaws of ICC. When certain countries, they are members of ICC and they allow Netanyahu to fly over or to visit, that is a total violation of ICC. Having said that, also, I would like to shed some light on following realities. My dear friends, the issue of the two states today, if you look at the reality on the ground, we see systematic destruction by Israel of the two-state solution. Systematic destruction of a possibility of a Palestinian state, because the state of Israel already exists. The destruction of Gaza, the forced transfer of our people, the settlement construction, the intensification of the colonization program. Today there are 881,000 Jewish settlers who are living illegally in an illegally expropriated Palestinian territories. They should not be there, but this has been designed to fully and totally erode every possibility of a Palestinian state. In order for me to conclude on this question, I hope that this coalition, the Progressive Alliance mobilization, should stand solid to protect international law, right of self-determination to people, on top of which the Palestinians, and also we should stand solid and create a unified front to make the Israeli occupation costly. Because today, look at what is happening. The borders of Israel has expanded by 541 square kilometers. Today, the security borders of Israel are on the borders of Russia, fully eroding Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and now over the skies of Iran on the borders. We should not allow this expansion mentality of colonial regime to continue violating international law. So back to your question, I think, yes, we need to empower ICC to enable it to take decisions that are implementable, not only for papers on the shelves. Palestinians have the right to self-determination, including living in a state, a sovereign, viable, contiguous state of Palestine on the border of 67, including Gaza, Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Palestine, and the West Bank, and the Palestinian refugees have all the right to return. So today this forum should make their voice loud and clear, in the same way that Spain did, in the same way that Italy. We are hope that you take the issue of Palestine further. Netherlands and all the countries who didn't yet, they should do it. That is what I hope, and that is my message to this incredible forum that we are gathered here today.
Thank you very much. Then turning to our guest from India, Salman. In your experience as India's former Minister of External Affairs, and in the context of persistent geopolitical conflicts across the world, how can states strengthen their diplomatic alliances and partnerships to enhance collective security and defense and achieve a lasting global peace?
Well, thank you very much. This is a core issue of foreign policy in our country, and I believe that this is an issue that causes anxiety in many countries of the world. Certainly, the progressive world is concerned and worried about what has happened of late. We've seen in India, we've grown up on the idea of non-alignment. Please understand that non-alignment was always different from being neutral. There was a reason why the expression non-alignment was used, so that you could retain an autonomy of an independence of your sovereign thought, but with certain set of values that you used irrespective of whether you were dealing with friends or foe. And if you were not aligned, you wouldn't necessarily have many foes. But the strength and courage to be able to speak to a friend to say that this is wrong, this is against values that we share, this is against the idea of the world that we share, is something that was very significant and important. In an imperfect world system, the rules, though, were largely structured to ensure that an imperfect system worked. We were able to give strength to the value-based rule system because of believing in non-alignment. Having given up non-alignment in many ways, partly because of changes that happened in the globe, and partly because it was just felt that it was no longer valuable and necessary, we have given a great setback, as it were, to the rules-based order. And I have to admit with some regret that the powerful states that have voiced their commitment to a rules-based order have remained quiet when Gaza, which is the most visible current example of the departure from a rule-based order, and the global south has drawn conclusions from this. India's government itself, and we have repeatedly said this to our government, has been conspicuously silent on civilian casualties, on the ICJ proceedings, and even in more recent times, in a more expanded manner, the sinking of the Iris Dana, which is a vessel that had come from Iran, was a guest of India, participated in exercises in India, and not too far from the Indian shores was actually torpedoed by the enemy of the Iranian government. This is all a matter, I do believe, because we have shifted ground from the value-based system that we have to be committed to. Values may not be an entire picture of the world global strategy. There has to be self-interest, but self-interest can be enlightened. Enlightened self-interest and narrow self-interest are vastly, vastly different. So I do believe the time has come for us to voice aggressively, strongly, and stridently from forums like this one that the selective application that's being permitted by powerful countries in protecting allies and sanctioning adversaries, the system does not remain viable. It's important that we return to a viable system. It's in the darkness that we must search for light, and it is important that we find the light during our lifetimes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this hopeful message. Then, Machris, you were active with the Filipino Akbayan Citizens Action Party, and also a lot of you know her also from the Network for Social Democracy in Asia. Asian Pacific countries also face serious risks from climate change, be it geopolitical tensions, energy market disruptions, and more. And how can the Asia Pacific region and the EU strengthen our economic, diplomatic ties, especially to overcome the major global challenges that we are discussing?
Thank you, Kathy. If you look at those countries that are affected by the oil crisis because of the war in Iran, you will see the top ones in Asia that are now tripling the cost of fuel more than any part of the world, who are now in military governments for the past 30 years. These are from Asia, like also in Africa. Who are the most vulnerable in climate change? This is in Asia. We experience in the cooperation of our sister parties that should not be a normalized reality, but it has to be basis of cooperation to overcome problems with our sister parties, especially in Europe, and the institutions in Europe. You have political economic instruments that are available. But the current world that we live now, the priorities are different because foreign policy is characterized by transactional politics, very, very rampant these days. Inward nationalism, very rampant these days. But what would Asia Pacific, Indo-Pacific learn, benefit from European cooperation? I said the three problems: climate change, democracy, energy crisis. And these are crises that are not only being debated in Europe, but are also being shared with European solutions that I think should be basis of our cooperation to solve problems on energy transition, to solve problems on disputes on sovereignty, to solve the crisis of democracy, which, well, Europe is also facing. But Europe has instruments to look at environmental, political, human rights standards in your trade and foreign policy that should be applied, yeah? When we negotiate to the parties that are involved in exacerbating the problems and not solving it. And I believe that the socialist and democrat groups in the European Union is poised to be able to lead such project, that an Asia-Europe cooperation on the basis of values and on the basis of solving this crisis could be something that would generate solutions than promote more crisis.
Thank you very much. And then let's turn to the perspective of Italy. Pepe, we saw last week, I think, for the first time, a united politics in Italy, but that was only due to the attack of the American president. But normally the Partito Democratico is a very vocal critic of the policies of Giorgia Meloni's foreign policy, be it, like we discussed, be it in Palestine, be it now with the war against Iran. What do you think, describes a value-based, progressive foreign policy where we respect international law, human rights, fundamental values?
Thank you, Cathy. First of all, let me thank the PS, Macris, and the Progressive Alliance, and our Spanish comrades for organizing this wonderful global progressive mobilization. Because, as we always say with the line, we cannot leave internationalism to the nationalists. Progressive cooperation today is not an option, it's a necessity and a duty. A necessity because from the United States to India, from Argentina to the heart of Europe, we are fighting the same battles. In every country, the right wing is a part of a global movement that is eroding democracy, dismantling a rule-based international order, and spreading chaos around the world. And the liberal democracy, a paradox theorized and practiced by Viktor Orban, was defeated in Hungary, but the battle is not over. In Italy, we have just achieved a great result, let me say, because we won the constitutional referendum and prevented Meloni from changing the foundations of our democracy. There is a great lesson here that we would share with you, because unity is the key. Remember, Giorgia Meloni is in power because the progressive and democratic camp was divided. It was not sufficiently mobilized. We cannot give them this gift again. Well, Putin, Trump, and Netanyahu do not merely share a political style. They share a worldview, one in which the strong do as they will, and the weak suffer as they must. The progressives must respond equally at global level. But first, as European progressive, we must be honest about Europe, because so far Europe has not reacted with strength to all of this. And it lost credibility in the eyes of the world when it failed, for example, to speak the same words it spoke for Ukraine in the face of the genocide in Gaza. When it failed to take coherent and brave actions, such as suspending the EU-Israel agreement, which today stands as the symbol of the double standard. There has been an exception to all of this. Our comrade President Pedro Sanchez. Giorgia Meloni was at the opposite extreme. She was the only leader who legitimizes the attack to Venezuela. Meloni has been always MAGA. She took part in that ridiculous board of peace that we called board of war. Together with Orban, she has been Trump's closest friend in Europe, a relationship, as you mentioned before, that broke down only a few days ago when Trump dressed as Jesus Christ and attacked the Pope for speaking for peace. Only for that. So, as Orban has been defeated, she will be soon. Also because in these difficult years, we have built a different vision, very, very close to Sanchez's one. From Gaza and President Stayeg, we stand and call for the recognition of a Palestinian state. From Gaza to Kiev, and I will say hello to my friend Bogdan from Kiev. And from the Middle East to Venezuela, to Greenland, a vision firm on principles and defending our interest. And to conclude, I would like to say that now, as progressive, we must be more ambitious because the defense of human rights and international law must go hand in hand with our commitment to building a just peace, both in Ukraine and Middle East, because only in this way we have the strength, political and moral, to carry forward our struggle for freedom and justice and equality.
Thank you very much, Pepe. Rafael, you co-founded the Common Action Forum, and you're also a professor not far away from here in Madrid, right? And tell us, what is your diagnosis of the current geopolitical state of the world, and what are, according to you, the structural problems we need to be aware of to overcome the crisis we are facing?
Kati, thank you very much, and thank you very much for being here. I'm really honored to share here the panel with the fellows, prestigious fellows. First of all my solidarity to everyone who's suffering and living under war. I think this is the first thing we need to really emphasize. This is something that we should not be leaving, and many innocents are dying each and every day. So just being told that I'm just going to be touched more like on the topic of our session. I don't have this rich political background that my colleagues here have, so I'm going to bring some of the elements that I think I can contribute a little bit to the discussion, which is sociology from my teaching, and some geopolitical comments on the analysis that we develop at the Common Action Forum, all right? So the first thing I would like to say, actually, is that I would like to frame this in another way, not from the economic point of view, right? I'm going to do it this in another way around. So it's not so much that trade and industrial policy that shape geopolitical competition, but rather the power strategies of the major powers that, especially the United States right now, that are rewriting the rules of trade, altering industrial dynamics, and eroding international legal frameworks. And this is about the structural diagnosis we are talking about. So all this is an attempt to manage, basically from the United States, to manage the decline, their decline, and how to slow down the rise of China, for example, which is getting close to overtaking the United States in the upcoming years. So I would even say that Trump is desperately trying to get China and Russia to agree on some sort of a new Yalta treaty. And why that? Just to reset the board and restart the game from a position of advantage. A Yalta Treaty at this time would not only exclude colonized peoples, but most of the planet. And what we can say quite clearly is that it's not going to happen. China, nobody is going to engage in this kind of delusional ideas. So now, okay, you would be right to say that looking, the world from this point of view, we would be ignoring a very important Marxist lesson. Which lesson is this one? Basically, that the material and economic foundations of a society, what he called back then base or infrastructure, deeply conditions the social and political and spiritual processes. That is what he called back then superstructure. So the rules, and here's the first point I'd like to make, the rules of global trade and institutional architecture of international systems are not an exception. We need to accept that they are not neutral when we are talking about the crisis, the institutional crisis we are experiencing nowadays. So, all right, I agree with that. I think everyone here agrees with that as well. But I also think it's important to mark some distance from that kind of economic determinism. That means politics and ideology have real autonomy and the capacity to push back and reshape that Marxist base. And geopolitics is not only a superstructure of capital, but it's also a field of struggle with its own internal logics. So I would just finalize here, since we only have 3 minutes, so we cannot really develop much deeper that. We know that we are talking about the new liberal crisis at the end. So we are talking about some crisis we were not capable to respond systematically and systemically. And under this condition, we see that once in power, the far right wing that is basically capitalizing out of this energy disruption and so on, they are not capable to give the responses for that as well. But they are trying to appropriate this kind of geopolitical apparatus in order to make more money, or what we see in the United States. Basically, you create more speculation, you accelerate the process of inequality, and so on and so forth. So basically, we are living not only one structural crisis, but we are living also the crisis of the subject of a political change. And this is going to be my very last point here, if I have 30 seconds more.
Yes.
30 seconds more. I would even recall like other authors that are not progressive at all. Let us think about Marshall McLuhan, who thought about, the medium is the message. So basically, the form is really defining the content. For us progressives, this is a real tragedy, because we are really worried about the content, not about the form quite often. Also Peter Berger, which is not a guy who is really like a progressive, but he already told us, both of them in the 60s, that globalization brings this kind of pluralism, and pluralism can have a very dangerous output. On one side, we can have this kind of radical relativism, and on the other side, we can really have fundamentalism based on nation and religion. So, just to say something about the Spanish people here, Ortega y Gasset, he was also very critical to this idea of the masses, and probably I will have like some time to talk about you if I have the chance to answer perhaps a second question. Then we will go further on that. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Rafael. And I think what's already clear is it doesn't matter where progressive are living around this globe. We all share the same analysis. I think the same foes. I already heard the name of Orban coming up, of Trump, of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but also of the same hopeful outlook. Now, for the second round of questions, as you already probably guessed, we have 2 minutes to answer. Otherwise, we're going into the next session. So I'd like to turn back to you, Mohamed Staye. You have governed under occupation, a situation that prevents genuine economic development by merely managing dependency. should we, according to you, fundamentally rethink the mechanisms of international aid?
Look, I think international aid has really failed fully and totally to bring any development to whatever you want to call it, South countries, third world countries, or whoever. International aid has to be redesigned in a way for the benefit of the people rather than for the benefit of the donors. Because we know that in every dollar, for example, United States give to any country 52 cents. 52 cents of every dollar goes back to Washington because aid is conditional. And therefore, I think aid should not be conditional, one. Second, when it comes to economic development, in Palestine, for example, and in the region in general, Israel has a categorization of the region based on what I call 4 M's: minds, money, markets, and muscles. Minds is technology and so on, and Israel wants to have a monopoly over whatever they call minds. And then other countries in the region, they are categorized to be M for muscles, which means the cheap labor, including Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. And then M for money goes for M for the Gulf countries. They are the source of capital. And then the whole region is M for markets. The issue has to do with that one single country is allowed to graduate from one category to the other. And that is what happened in Palestine. When the Palestinians have moved from a peasantry to urban, to data, to modern economy, to technology and so on, we have been pushed and distracted and destroyed. Same has happened in Iraq. Same has happened in the region because the region is condemned to fall within this categorization. The other point I would like to mention, under settler colonial regime, economic development becomes extremely de-development rather than development. De-development, it means at a time when Israel controls all inputs of economic development, including labor, including capital, and including land as an economic input. Palestinian land is shrinking every day because of settler colonial regime and because there are today 881,000 Jewish settlers who have been taking land, dispossessing Palestinians and taking land for free. Remember one important thing, you have visited the region so many times and you have seen the settlers taking land for free, taking water for free, and now they are confiscating cattle, sheep and goats and cows and donkeys and horses are taken by force by the settlers from Palestinian farmers and so on. So what Israel has designed the region to be a process of de-development rather than a process of development, because a rich Palestinian, it means that he will be capable to resist, and a poor Palestinian will be thinking of his piece of bread of tomorrow. To conclude on this issue, I also would like to mention that Israel has imposed on the Palestinians what I call colonial dependency. It means that Israel wanted to incorporate the Palestinian economy into that of Israel so that economic sovereignty will lead to political sovereignty, something that Israel is fully and totally fighting against this Palestinian sovereignty. In conclusion, yes, international aid has been very generous to Palestine. Very unfortunately, international aid did shrink from 30% of our budget to 1%. And now, again, unfortunately, that international aid became conditional. For example, Europe has been saying that if you don't change the textbooks of the Palestinians, then we will reconsider giving you aid. What does this changing the textbooks? They are asking us, for example, to say that Palestinian refugees don't have the right to return. What shall we say about Palestinian refugees who have been more than 80 years in the refugee camps of Lebanon and Syria? Shall we say that they have been camping, they have been on vacation, that we cannot say that Jerusalem is integral part of Palestine? What shall we say? That Jerusalem is integral part of Israel? We will never say that. We will always say that Palestine is going to be free and Palestine is going to be sovereign and that Jerusalem will be the eternal capital of the state of Palestine. That is what we will say.
Shukran. Back to Salman. For more than a decade now, Indian Prime Minister Modi has been weakening democracy, weakening the freedom of speech. And given this, how does the Indian National Congress serve as a leading force of resistance and a defender of global democratic principles and justice?
Well, thank you very much. It's always very difficult to come across national borders and be confronted with the reality that's at home. The very fact that we are here with you and the very fact that we had hosted you in India last year against much resistance, we believe that doing it again this year will be a clear announcement of our commitment for the cause that you represent, the Progressive Alliance represents. Now, we are in a very difficult situation in our country because there's a very complicated manner in which the idea of economic development has been intertwined with the hegemony of a religion. And this is completely against our constitutional belief, our constitutional background, and what we believe the Indian nation considers as cherished values. But there are moments in time when people opt to take a path that seems more attractive than the path that their forebears have given to them and the direction that the forebears have given to them. We in the Indian National Congress are absolutely determined to battle the ground battle and the battle of minds. And we do believe that the most important struggle for us is the battle of minds, and that we will prevail, that ultimately we will overcome, because we do believe there is a basic merit in the idea of freedom. And freedom has many dimensions. And just mouthing freedom and not letting people being free is a very troublesome thing. But we are committed. We are committed to freedom of every kind, social liberty to have freedom of choice, to have freedom of the way of life, and diversity as a special dimension of national existence. And I think that's what we share with all of you here. And I do believe that if we voice this concern together in the world will finally listen. There is no reason why they won't, because the success of the conservative world based on their strategies is a temporary success. I do believe ultimately we will prevail in terms of the ideas that we have, the ideas of a progressive world.
Thank you so much. Speaking of justice, Makris, you are also co-chair of the Feminist Foreign Policy Progressive Voices Collective. And what is feminist foreign policy? What does it mean to you? And why is a feminist lens also crucial to address existing barriers and challenges in the topics we are discussing today, geopolitics?
Thank you, Kathy, for putting this in the dimension of the discussion. When we talk about the problems of the world, it's always hard power, and there is the lens that is least looked at. And the Progressive Alliance, together with our partner organizations, are espousing feminist foreign policy as a framework, because there are 600 million women and girls living in wars. There are 2 billion in the populations of the world that are living in some authoritarian form of government, and that now there are ongoing conflicts that cannot be resolved by the same frameworks that we have been using. Otherwise, we will not be on this mess. So our offering is a feminist foreign policy that is progressive and that is shared by both the global north and the global south, a decolonialized, equitable, and really putting into the lens the gender dimension of our problems. There are 3 responses to this. It's rights, representation, and resources. But these are not words, but evidences. These are evidences that when we see the lens of rights, resources, and representation of women, democracies are more resilient, peace is more durable, our international law is more taken up by equitable structured negotiations and economic growth, which is something that not all will share how to implement. But it is evidence that with using this framework, there is economic growth which everybody will not counter. So as feminists, as progressives, I started with the basis of our cooperation, values, and solutions to problems. And this is what we offer using the lens of feminist foreign policy. Only with using the lens of promoting women's rights, resources, and representation should we make solutions to these problems more durable, more lasting, more convincing. The task for progressives is to adapt it not only in Europe, but across the world. Thank you.
Very good. Pepe, talking about trade, one of the dividing issues, not only in Europe, but if we're very honest, sometimes also in our own political family, has been the EU-Mercosur agreement. The Partito Democratico is in favor of that agreement. Can you tell us a little bit why you think this is a progressive agreement?
Yes, thank you. And let me be frank. I think it was a huge mistake to keep our Latin American friends waiting 20 years to finalize this agreement. And when we finally managed to do it, I think it's totally crazy to be divided over it. We need more friends in this world, not fewer. And before I criticize the European Union for its weaknesses, but I want to say that both the agreement with India and Mercosur agreement have been the best response to Trump now, to the return of protectionism. And we move on because we were born as a free market project in response to the tragedy of 2 world wars. But to be honest, also unregulated globalization has not guaranteed peace. We must work as progressive to ensure that free markets are also fair. And what does fair trade mean? Not the uncritical free trade of the 90s, but agreements that include binding commitments on labor rights, environmental standards, and real mutual benefits. We cannot allow, I want to add one more thing, we cannot allow that the deep ties between, for example, Latin America and Europe to be reduced to trade flows alone. It's our interest as progressives, European, first and foremost, to transform this trade agreement into a space for a real global political cooperation. And in this perspective, I'm not a pessimist. If you look at the world beyond the so-called West, we realize that there is a majority of countries, of people that don't want to surrender to a new Cold War or to the empire's diplomacy. And we must become a compass, a beacon for the global majority that seeks peaceful cooperation for the well-being and the survival of our planet. And we must also work together in this, in the framework of this agreement, of this political cooperation, to reform multilateral institution, international financial architecture, to make it more just, more effective. I want to conclude with a quote. Antonio Gramsci once said, "The old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters." Today we can see an old monster, and it's again nationalism. But simply invoking the word of yesterday will not be enough to defeat it. The progressive answer to this global chaos is not nostalgia for a past that was never perfect and will never return, but an extraordinary effort to build something better, a multilateral order reform, strengthened, a Europe that speaks with one voice, and a global movement committed to building together a new world, more just, more human, and maybe also a little bit happier, just like here in Barcelona.
Thank you. Rafael, the final question is to you. A lot of the panelists spoke about what we see is, of course, the huge pressure that the international order is under. Now, what do you think progressive forces can do to strengthen multilateralism? 2 minutes.
2 minutes, I'm aware of that. And I'm going to reinforce what Pepe was just saying and try to answer the question everyone here wants to answer, right? But Pepe, just quickly, regarding the EU and Mercosur agreement, I'm from Brazil. So there is something very crucial for us Latin Americans in that sense, is that without these agreements, the risk of Mr. Trump going there to Latin America and just establishing bilateral agreements would just disintegrate the continent. So this is actually a reason why multilateralism is so important, to keep the integration of that continent independent of the government that is ruling the country at a certain time, but we need a democracy. So this was crucial for it's not about economic metrics. It is about politics, it's about citizenship that people will still be able to practice. So regarding this issue, 100 years ago, plus minus, there was a guy called Georg Simmel, and he gave a very beautiful and brilliant lesson. He was trying to show us what is the difference in a world between like a relationship of two, he called this dyad, and the relationship of three or more, he called it triad. So let us just take this to bilateralism and multilateralism. Why is it so important? Because when we're talking about relationship of two, there is no external structure to that. So basically the two individuals, they are still there and playing their own singularities. There is no affection, there is nothing. So basically the strongest will always win. So why do you choose sometimes bilateralism if you are the weakest one? So basically you think about the other weaker partners or actors, and you think, okay, at least out of this relationship with the strongest, I might gonna be in a better position than the other others who are weak as well. But as soon as you put the third element or the fourth element, magic happens, because then you start to see merging new kinds of creatures, not the Gramscian monsters, but sometimes beautiful creatures like arbiters, like mediators, like figures of conciliation, figures that might play a role and will change those singularities. This is the character of multilateralism. If you take this sociological lesson to geopolitics, okay, It's not like a cake recipe. You are having today being enacted a bilateral meeting between Brazil and Spain, a very important one, but there is a difference here. I mean, we know that this meeting is really built upon ethics of conviction and ethics of responsibility. We know this is only tactical, because we know these actors, what they are searching for basically is strategically is multilateralism to build a multipolar order.
Thank you.
Just a very last comment.
Very last comment, yes.
Since I...
No, I'm just afraid that once we're running over time, people start moving out and into the room. But the final comment,
because I also think we want to listen to Mr.
Of course.
Oganal. So, going back to Ortega and Gasset, again, not really the most progressive person on earth, but just to see how our world is really in this shape. He said, just before the Second World War, he said, we need to move beyond consumerism and nationalism in order to cultivate a pan-European tradition at a time when we face a mass that is shaped by media, individualized and thirsty for belonging, and the ruling class that seems unable to set an exemplary course in the community. So I believe progressivism can be a vector for that kind of transformation, but on one condition. It has to be genuinely open, committed to a deep sense of otherness, and that is able to connect pan-Europeanism and the global South around the interests that are at the same time plural and common. And I stop here.
No, thank you very much. And let me also thank, before we go to our final speaker, let me already thank all the panelists for sharing, and it's a wonderful feeling to unite globally with progressive powers, because I think together we can do so much more. Then finally, I'm very happy to welcome Junya Ogawa,
yes,
President of the Centrist Reform Alliance from Japan, to give his remarks, share his own vision, and close our discussion.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. If you don't mind, just can I stand up? If you don't mind, let me stand up. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm Junya Ogawa from Japan, the Japanese opposition leader. Of course, at center-left, central liberal. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to deliver the closing speech. I found the remarks made by each of the panelists today to be extremely insightful and engaging. Based on the discussion, I would like to offer my own brief reflections and summary. We now stand at a historic